The Gospel of Mark, chapter 3. Imagine walking through a crowded street, feeling the weight of your burdens, and suddenly you see someone in the distance. Their presence alone brings peace, hope, and the possibility of healing. That person is Jesus. And as he moves through the pages of the Gospel of Mark, chapter 3, he reveals powerful lessons about compassion, unity, and faith that still speak to us today. You see, the Gospel of Mark chapter 3 isn't just a collection of events that happened a long time ago. It's an invitation to live differently, to see others through the lens of love, to stand firm in the face of opposition, and to redefine what it means to belong. Today we will explore the key moments of this chapter, and through these timeless stories, find ways to transform our hearts, minds, and actions. Healing on the Sabbath, compassion over legalism. The chapter opens with a powerful act of healing. Jesus enters the synagogue, and there's a man with a withered hand. The religious leaders, the Pharisees, are watching closely, not because they want to witness a miracle, but because they're looking for a reason to accuse him. It's the Sabbath, a day set aside for rest. And according to Jewish law, no work should be done. Healing, in their eyes, was considered work. Now, Jesus knows their hearts. He knows the value of tradition and rules above compassion. So he asks them a question that cuts to the core of the issue. Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill? In this moment, Jesus redefines what it means to honor God. It's not about strict adherence to the law. It's about the heart behind the actions. Doing good, healing, helping, showing kindness should never be limited by human rules. Now, Jesus heals the man, not only restoring his hand, but also sending a message that compassion always trumps legalism. This challenges us today. Where do we allow rules or traditions to block acts of love or mercy? And how often do we withhold kindness because we feel constrained by societal norms or expectations? You see, Jesus shows us that compassion is boundless, and healing, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, should always be our priority. Unity and diversity. Jesus calls the 12 disciples. Now, as we continue through this chapter, we see Jesus calling the 12 disciples, ordinary men from different walks of life with unique strengths and weaknesses. There's Simon Peter, a fisherman who acted impulsively. Matthew, a tax collector, who was despised by his own people for working with the Romans. Then there's Thomas, who would later struggle with doubt, and Judas, who would betray Jesus. Despite their differences, Jesus saw their potential and called them to follow him. This is a profound message for us today. You know, we live in a world that often focuses on division, whether it's politics, culture, race, or status. But Jesus shows us that unity is possible when we embrace our diversity for a common purpose. The disciples were not chosen because they were perfect or because they all thought the same way. They were chosen because they had the potential to grow, to learn, and to spread God's message of love. Now, in our lives, we can be like the disciples, imperfect but called to a higher purpose. Jesus didn't expect them to be flawless. He expected them to be faithful. This reminds us that God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. The key is not in our perfection, but in our willingness to step forward and say yes to God's plan, even when we don't fully understand it. Opposition and accusations, standing firm in faith. Now, as Jesus' ministry grows, so does the opposition. In this chapter, we see that even Jesus' family begins to doubt him, thinking he has lost his mind. Meanwhile, the religious leaders, the scribes, accuse him of being possessed by Beelzebub, saying that his power to cast out demons comes from Satan. Now, how does Jesus respond to this? With clarity and wisdom, he tells them, "How can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand." He goes on to explain that his power comes from the Holy Spirit, not from any evil force. Jesus doesn't let these accusations derail his mission. Instead, he uses them as an opportunity to teach about unity and the source of true spiritual authority. Now, this part of the Gospel of Mark chapter 3 teaches us how to respond when we face criticism or when others misunderstand our intentions. In life, there will always be voices of doubt, people who question our motives or challenge our beliefs. But like Jesus, we are called to stand firm in our faith. We don't need to convince everyone or defend ourselves at every turn. Instead, we can trust that God knows our hearts and that his truth will prevail. I want you to ask yourself, are there times in your life when you felt misunderstood or unfairly judged? I want you to remember that Jesus experienced the same. Yet he did not allow these moments to deter him from his purpose. Neither should we. When opposition comes, let it strengthen your resolve rather than weaken your spirit. Expanding the definition of family. Who are my brothers and sisters? As we reach the end of the chapter, there's a powerful moment that speaks to the heart of what it means to belong. Jesus is teaching a crowd, and his family comes looking for him. They're standing outside, calling for him to come home, but instead of immediately going to them, Jesus uses the opportunity to redefine what family truly means. He looks around at the people seated with him and says, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does God's will is my brother and sister and mother." Now, this moment expands the This moment expands the idea of family beyond bloodlines. Jesus is inviting us into a spiritual family where the bonds of faith and shared purpose are stronger than biology. You see, this is a message of hope for anyone who feels disconnected or alone. In God's kingdom, family is not limited by genetics. It's about shared belief, love, and a commitment to doing God's will. So, if you've ever felt like you don't belong, know that Jesus offers you a place in his family. The doors are always open, and all it takes is a willingness to follow him. And for those of us who are already part of this family, this is a call to welcome others with open arms, to embrace those who may be different from us, but who share a common faith. So the Gospel of Mark chapter 3 leaves us with profound lessons about how to live in a world that often feels divided and broken. Jesus shows us that compassion should always come before legalism, and we are called to unity despite our differences, and that even in the face of opposition, we can stand firm in our faith. Most importantly, he reminds us that we are part of a greater family, a family united not by blood, but by love and a shared commitment to God's will. So, as you go forward, I ask you to reflect on these questions. Where can you show more compassion, even when it's inconvenient? How can you contribute to unity in your community, embracing differences rather than being divided by them? And how can you stand firm in your faith, even when others question or misunderstand you? You see, the teachings in the Gospel of Mark chapter 3 are not just stories to read. They are calls to action. Let them inspire you to live with greater compassion, to seek unity, and to strengthen your faith, knowing that you are part of God's family. And as you carry these lessons into the world, may you bring healing, hope, and love to everyone you encounter. Thank you. Tomorrow we'll discuss Chapter 4.